We're back on Politics Nation with more on today's historic Supreme Court decision. Republicans like will admit Romney didn't waste any time renewing the party's promise to repeal President Obama's health care law.
I disagree with the Supreme Court's decision, and I agree with the dissent. What the court did not do on its last day in session, I will do on my first day if elected President of the United States. And that is, I will act to repeal Obamacare.
But back in 2006, listen to what he said about the central part of the law, the individual mandate. This was shortly before he signed his own version of health reform in Massachusetts.
With regards to the mandate, the individual responsibility program, which I proposed, I was very pleased to see that the compromise from the two houses includes the personal responsibility principle. That is essential for bringing health care costs down for everyone and getting everybody the health insurance they deserve and need.
Romney has done a complete 180, but he's not the only Republican who was for the individual mandate before he was against it. The first president, George Bush, Senator John McCain, and former House Speaker Newt Gingrich were just some of the top Republicans who once backed the mandate. Isn't that interesting? But now Republicans want to make the health care debate all about taxes. Joining me now is former Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell and an NBC News political analyst, and Bob Schrum, a Democratic strategist who ran Ted Kennedy's race against Mitt Romney in 1994. Governor Rendell, let me start with you. How will today's ruling affect the presidential race? Let's talk about the politics of this.
Well, interestingly, I think it will help fire up the Republican base. There's no question about it. And what they look like spoiled children are doing by saying we're going to vote to repeal Obamacare in the House on July 11th, they're just trying to fire up the base. And they know that there's no chance it'll ever be repealed because you'd have to have 61 Republican senators when the dust clears after the election, and that's not going to happen. It's never going to be repealed. It's here to stay. But they're feeding the base. They want to jack up turnout. And for us, we ought to take a deep breath and consider that this president, with courage, and courage to go forward when he was told not to, even by his own advisors. This president has done something historic. He has made the United States join the nations, the developed nations of the world, all of whom guarantee health insurance, not health insurance, health coverage to their citizens.
Well, not only was he told not to do it by some of his advisors, he was condemned by some leaders in his own party that said, why is he doing this first? Now everybody is taking vows.
And Al, he didn't do it first. He didn't do it first. He did stimulus first. I hate it when people say he didn't attend to the economy. True. He did stimulus first. But he showed courage and got this done. It's a historic achievement. And if our base needs any other excuse to get out and vote, it boggles the mind.
Well, and 86 million people that need the coverage and millions already starting. But let me go to you, Bob Schrum. Let Ohio Representative Smith doing an early celebration on health care decision. Let me show you this.
The laggers who are found.
What are they doing? No, what else?
Speak!
Speak! Oh, thank God! No! They struck down the individual mandate. They took it away? Yay!
Now, this was Congresswoman Smith when she thought the mandate had been struck down, because she heard the first part, but then the Chief Justice said but, and then went on to say that they were finding it unconstitutional based on taxes. But look at how emotional she had gotten, and I mean all kinds of gestures, because she thought they had overturned the mandate. And then you have the extremists, like you have Media Matters reporting on a blog that ex-militia blogger who predicts an armed insurrection over health care decision. So there's a lot of emotion and passion in this. And as the governor said, they're going to try to drive all of that to try and fire up their base to vote against the president.
Yeah, three quick things. First of all, a couple of cable networks, as you know, got this wrong, and so that's why we got to see what she was doing. Secondly, I can't understand why somebody would be so joyous at the idea that 30 million people would lose health care, that people with pre-existing conditions couldn't get insurance, and that there would be lifetime limits so that if you had cancer and you were sick and you were in the hospital, the insurance company could call up and say, sorry, that's it, we're not paying anymore. I think Ed's exactly right about the base, but we have to understand what that Republican base is. Bloomberg asked the poll right last week, and 43% of people said they wanted the law upheld with minor changes, 15% wanted it entirely upheld, and about 30% wanted it thrown out. That is who they're speaking to. They're speaking to that 30%, and those folks are going to turn out. Now, we have to make sure we turn out our folks, too, that we tell the story not only about the economy, but about health care, about those kids who are getting coverage, staying on their parents' insurance policy. I think this, in the end, is going to work very strongly to help the president get reelected.
Now, Governor, is this an opportunity for the president to reset the discussion on health care? I mean, when you look at the polls, New York Times, CBS News polls shows Americans strongly favor parts of the health care law by President Obama. 85% support covering those with pre-existing conditions. 77% support reduced drug costs for Medicare recipients. 68% support adults under 26 staying on parents' plans. I mean, can he now retool and reset this argument now that the Supreme Court has found that it is not unconstitutional?
Well, I don't know if it's true for Bob, for you, or for you, Reverend, but when the president made his short speech, he was wonderful in setting out exactly what's in this bill and why it's a good thing for the country. Would that he had done that back in July of the year that it was passed. If he had done that, maybe health care wouldn't, as an overall bill, have a negative opinion in the hearts and minds of the American people, because the bill has so many good things that so many people agree with. And I think what's good now, as Bob said, is it's giving Democrats the right to say, this is a president who has made history. He accomplished what no other president, and presidents have been talking about this for 5, 6, 7 different presidents. He did it. He accomplished it. It's good. It's not perfect. And by the way, the president sounded presidential when he said, we will work with you to try to improve it. And that's a very important message. And if the Republicans weren't a bunch of spoiled kids, they'd sit down and go to the president and say, Mr. President, there are 6 things we'd like you to look at. And I think the president would respond positively to that. It's a great victory for him, and our base ought to understand how historic this is.
Bob, you're a major strategist. Would you advise the president's reelection campaign to push forward on what this means, how historic it is, and what it means to millions of Americans? Or would you tell them to equally stress that we'll admit Romney himself supported the mandate and made it law in Massachusetts?
Well, I think Romney's going to have a hard time in the debates, because I think the moderators are even going to ask him about this. He's out of a rationale. During the primary, he said, well, I think it's a good idea, but it ought to be decided at the state level. It's not properly a federal subject. The court, led by Chief Justice Roberts today, who, by the way, I think did a lot to reestablish the reputation of that institution.
Absolutely.
The court said, no, it is properly a federal function. I think the president ought to get out there, and once again, he has a perfect contrast. He's standing up for the majority of Americans, for the middle class, for all these folks with pre-existing conditions and who face lifetime limits, all the people who don't have health insurance, and Romney's standing once again with a few in favor of a large tax cut for the wealthy without providing any real solution to the health insurance problem. I think it's a winning issue.
And we can characterize Al, the president, as a real leader, because he did exert leadership on this. He took risks. He had courage. It's exactly what a leader should do, and he deserves tremendous credit for it.
It's the biggest social change since Franklin D. Roosevelt. Thanks.
There's no doubt about it. Thank you both, Governor Ed Rendell, Bob Shrum. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks.
Coming up, President Obama's signature achievement came down to one man. The Bush-appointed Chief Justice John Roberts, and his history with Obama make it even more remarkable. And how this law is helping Americans right now. We talked to a woman who says she wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for the law. Stay with us.